Hello, everybody. Kevin Markwick here, and welcome along to the first in a whole new series of podcasts which I've put together because the world needs more podcasts. I'm going to be talking to lots and lots of interesting people. I've changed the title. It's now The Sound of the Picture House, which could cover a multitude of sins. I don't care. It's our podcast. We can do what the hell we like with it. The first show, which I hope you will enjoy, we had a lot of fun recording it, is basically Phil Lott, who is a film and TV producer and director, photographer in Los Angeles. He's a dear, dear friend. We've made films together over the years and got up to all sorts of hijinks one way and another. And he's going to be joining me, hopefully, for quite a few of the podcasts. And we can make them quite transatlantic, sometimes from LA, sometimes from Uckfield. From Uckfield to LA. Maybe we should have called it that. Does that sound a bit wanky, though? Probably. Anyway, the first one is part one of our trawl through what we thought was some of the best film music of 2020. Now, I know we're a bit late. It's receding into the back, actually not even very fast. It's receding very slowly into the background on account of January seeming to take forever. Anyway, this is part one. Inevitably, because we tend to ramble on, we've forgotten to give you some of the information about some of the films and the composers and the various things and bits and pieces. So I'll hopefully fill that in for you at the end, but I do hope you enjoy it. This is part one of Phil and I's trawl through the music of 2020. So what we thought we'd do is, just have a quick trawl through that. And I mean, you came up with, what was it, 2 or 3 hours worth?
I did. I wasn't very decisive, was I?
No,
sorry.
That's fine. Because it's impossible anyway, isn't it, to pick the best? Are these
well,
the
it was
best?
also, I think if you like a soundtrack, you like several tracks on the soundtrack. So I wasn't very fair. I just put like 5 tracks on the same. Yeah,
no, that's okay. But I was just thinking that actually soundtrack albums. Now, I'm no expert. I don't know whether you would count yourself. I can't speak for you, but I can't say I'm an expert on film music. Either it's form or it's. Would you say you're an expert?
I would not say I'm an expert, but I would say I have. I think you are protesting too much. I think you. No. I have talked about soundtracks since we were younger.
Yes. Yeah, well, that's true. That is yes. I would hasten to add, everybody, that I'm actually the older man in this relationship. Only by about 10 or 12 years.
Yes.
But maybe a bit more. I don't know. Actually.
But I think you and I shared that thing that you talked about, which is when we were younger with kids and you didn't have a VHS player at home, and that was the only way of connecting with the film would be the soundtrack.
Absolutely.
I was very lucky to have Decca Records double cassette box sets that were available at Dixon's or whatever it was back in the day at Langley Shopping Centre.
Yeah.
where I used to go and buy my $1.99.
Yeah, I think because it was the only way of owning a bit of the film, wasn't it? It was the soundtrack.
Yeah. And I haven't seen most of the films I was listening to the soundtracks of.
Yeah, but what?
Especially like John Barry's, double album. And
I had
James Bond themes, but I didn't know many more.
No, to be fair, no. I mean, John Williams loomed large pretty early on. And I would say John Barry, definitely. What I did have was those Jeff Love albums. Do you remember? I mean, it's not the authentic soundtrack album, but when there was, again, no other way of affording, and actually soundtrack albums were more difficult to source at that point. It wasn't like, we didn't have, obviously, streaming, but,
right.
You
didn't?
No, funnily enough.
Oh,
back in the 1970s and early 80s. But the Jeff Love ones, like the big terror movie themes and the big war themes and that kind of stuff. I wasn't going to buy. I couldn't get hold of the soundtrack for Where Eagles Dare, but I could get it on the Jeff Love compilation album, and it was close.
The Jeff Love compilation album, was that walking music? Was that playing in the foyer?
We did also use it in the theatre as well. Yeah, to be fair. But no, the one I had with the big what's the name? Terror movie themes had a slightly pony version of Jaws on it, which just I don't think it's whenever you hear the opening theme of Jaws played on anything other than the soundtrack album, it's never right, is it? It just isn't right. There's something about it. I mean, because there's a lot of albums by various orchestras that are brilliant, but the Jaws theme never seems to work for anything other than that original recording.
Why do you think that is? Do you think it's actually a physical recording thing, or do you think they're just doing it in a slightly cheaper key?
I don't know.
It saves them the money for doing it.
I really don't know what it is, but it's not right. And so actually the album then improved after that, and there was the Poseidon Adventure and the Towering Inferno and all that kind of stuff. Anyway, so, but one of the things I wanted to bring up just as a point of interest, particularly with these scores and that we're going through now, is that you get a soundtrack album now is, quite often hellishly long and full of very short cues, isn't it?
Yes, which I would admit to liking quite a lot.
Well, that's fine, and there's nothing wrong with it. But actually, sometimes I miss going back to the John Williams and the earlier scores that I bought, like the Jaws score, for instance, and the Close Encounters score. They were sort of amalgams, weren't they, of all the cues?
Yes, you're totally right. And they were never always. They were definitely recorded for the.
Oh, definitely.
It seemed like they were mixed or recorded especially for the album. They didn't seem to be.
Yeah. So it's like
a track they took straight from the.
So it's like a sort of potted version of all the cues that were in the film. Yes. And so that
was my 1970s joke about Avids and.
Oh, was it?
Not a good one. Don't really to go with that.
But what I mean is that it actually, in a way, had an arc in the same way that the film had. They'd kind of constructed this soundtrack album, so it started with the opening credit, main theme, and would end with the end credit music. And it was only really later on, because it took me, because Jaws was one of the first soundtrack albums I bought with my own money, and it took me ages online to find that. I've still got the album itself on the MCA label, on the vinyl album.
Oh yeah, mm-hmm. Is it the double album?
No. It was one out. It was one, and it had the tracks that you like on it. Two barrel chase or one barrel chase or whatever it's called, and tourists on the menu and all that kind of stuff. But when I came online to look at it online, like on Spotify or that, it's now this kind of album that's like 4 hours long. Of all the tiny
every single
cues.
Little piece of incidental music.
Yeah.
That sort of that helped play him in from the bathroom into the living room.
Yeah.
And that's it. Every single piece. Which, by the way, again, I'm totally fine with.
Yeah. No, that's fine. That's fine. But actually, I'm not so hardcore, so I quite like that sort of, okay, give me the what do you call those books?
Potted version.
Yeah. What do you
call
those
Cliff
books?
Notes?
Yeah.
Version.
Give me the Cliff Notes. Because you've got way more, and it does require. Some of those soundtrack albums, it requires an element of patience. Anyway, so you've seen the list that I ultimately put the playlist together because someone's got to do it.
You did. If I was going to the European Parliament, there are a couple that I might fight for.
Really?
That didn't make it yet. But we can talk about that later. As we get to them, there's a lot of very good music on here, which I love. And I think it really does represent what we were talking about, which is
and
a
also,
great cross-section.
It's also fairly broad. I think most people will have heard of most of these films, won't they?
There are a couple I had to watch this week.
I must admit, did I put it in there? Oh yeah, the only one I don't think there's only one I haven't seen, but I love the music so much. I thought, let's have it in there.
Oh, which one?
And that's the Marco Beltrami music from Underwater.
Yes.
But I gather the film's not all that. But we'll get to that.
Yes.
So the top of the list, if you like, we've got Parasite by Jung Jae-il. And I can find out nothing about him at all. I'm not sure anything about him. But I guess because it was kind of effectively the most celebrated film of the year, wasn't it? So
it was. Yeah. Obviously we should probably head off at the past, the conversation about what constitutes 2020 and what constitutes actually 2019.
Yes, because on one side of the Atlantic it's a different thing than it is from the other side of the because it wasn't released until January in the UK. So we're going on UK time because deep down, Phil,
it's better.
You're still, even though you jumped sort of ship.
Saluting doesn't work on radio.
You're still it doesn't. You're still in the You can't. You can put the British in the. No, I don't know. What's it? You
Good
can't
luck
take
with the end of that sentence. I'm with you.
You can't. Yeah. All right. So this is the music from Parasite. So that's Jung J. Il's score for Parasite.
If that score was for a low-budget indie comedy, so an indie movie set in Brighton about a crotchety old authoress who's having to share a house with a stupidly optimistic son.
Yes.
And they really just got back together, I think you go, yeah, that's great, but not a Korean dark cultural parable.
Okay, no, I think that's a fair point, and it's probably on the list because it was, probably a lazy choice, actually.
To the point, sorry, to be clear, I think that's what's cool about it. It's definitely a surprise. You wouldn't expect that, and that's just like the rest of the film.
It doesn't give you any cultural indicators of where the music is coming from, does it?
Which I think is very in vogue now. I think that's kind of cultural. What's the word? Not ambiguity. What's the other word? Agnostic. Culturally agnostic.
That's a good word.
I think it's something that a lot of composers talk about.
So the next one on our list is 1917, Thomas Newman.
Just amazing. This is my favourite.
Is it your favourite of the year, is it?
Yeah, totally. And I think I gave you like 6
Yeah,
tracks.
You did.
I'm sorry. I just think, aside from Thomas Newman being, at the top of his game and doing all the things that he's known and loved for in his scores, which I particularly like. This score, I think, had a particularly difficult job to do because it was having to help tell the tension. It was having to tell the story of a single shot. As we all know, the film was shot on a single shot. A lot of the anticipation and a lot of the signifiers you'd normally get with cuts were coming through the music and pacing. And I think this did so much of the heavy lifting. And this is not taking anything away from the filmmaking. It's all part of the big plan. It feels like. I just think that it just pulled off a masterstroke.
Yeah, I think so. I'm imagining then, I don't know, maybe we could get him on the show and ask him.
Oi, Thomas!
Thomas! He must be around there somewhere. Where is he? Where does he live? Is he up in like the Palisades or somewhere swanky?
I think he's probably in a different part of town than I am. I think they have a Newman wing of Los Angeles.
They probably do, yeah. Because actually he's Hollywood royalty, isn't he?
Yeah, I want to say that I'm not sure if this is the case, but Thomas Newman has recorded soundtracks on the Alfred Newman stage.
Yes,
at
well,
Fox,
almost certainly, yeah, I would have thought.
which
Because
is pretty
it was his,
nuts.
it's his father or his grandfather?
Let-
Must be his, no, it must be his father, surely.
Father, I think
Oh,
there's
man,
a,
we
I
should
think
know
there's a-
this one.
Well, there's also Randy as well.
Oh,
which-
Randy, yeah. Yeah, because he wrote the Fox fanfare and everything, didn't he? He was like the biggest big composer of big composers. So it's in the blood. But what I'm curious about, going back to what you just said, is whether he how much of the score, because scores are probably the last thing to go in the picture, aren't they? I mean, they're the last bit often.
Yes.
They're shown I was going to say VHS, but they're probably not VHS now. Oh, granddad, woofers and tweeters. They're shown the film right at in the last month or two, aren't they? After.
Yeah, I want to say though, that may not have been the case with this one. I don't know.
Yeah,
Last year, my 1917 knowledge was.
Yeah, no. I think it's fascinating, and I think we need to ask him that question.
Yes,
but in the meantime,
well, you remember all those, right? Well, you remember all those stories of during the rehearsals with a camera,
right,
in a field for weeks.
Yes,
so they could figure out how long the set needed to be, which I think was brilliant.
It is brilliant.
Second level right there.
It's very dazzling, isn't it?
So again,
well, we watched it again the other night. The film is very dazzling. And I just wonder sometimes whether you're kind of admiring the dazzlingness of it, as opposed to getting drawn into the story. Not to say that it isn't brilliant.
Didn't you forget it after a while?
Yeah, but that kind of makes you wonder why then, doesn't it? They could have saved themselves a lot of bother. I don't know. Look, hey, it is clearly a fantastic film and brilliantly conceived and brilliantly executed. But yeah, it almost felt like, I've got to make this difficult for myself. Or do you think it did add to the story the way? I
totally think it added to the story.
Yeah,
I think also
that's entirely legitimate. Yeah.
And you know more than anyone about film marketing. I
Yes.
think people came to see the film partly because of that.
Because they'd heard that. Yeah.
That magic of it, and also I think if you got an incredible director coming from theatre. I think the idea of actually kind of putting that ultimate dark art to the test in a movie fitting,
that's
allowed
a good point.
him to play out a single kind of emotion or a single kind of emotional line.
Yes, because it's almost like cinematic theatre in that regard. I mean, there were a couple of cheats, I guess. There were obviously a few cuts in there, but I must admit I enjoyed it far more the other night than the first time I saw it, simply because I was just relaxed about, I wasn't trying to, okay, come on then, where's the cut? Oh, look, that's clever, look, how do they do that? And I was just going with it, so I actually enjoyed it more there. So,
and I think the score also does a great job of building you to that moment, which obviously the whole film's building to at the end.
It does,
which is a piece of music I think you've.
Yeah, I've picked that. Yeah, the final piece, the Come
Where
Back to Us.
It's the first piece of music. It's the first piece of music that allows you to relax. It's the first piece of music throughout the film that doesn't have some sort of building tension in it.
Oh yeah, it's brilliant. It has that whole ticking clock thing going on all the time. That's part. Yeah, that
and then it releases.
Yeah, absolutely.
In this track,
that's why I kind of picked that, because that's the most sort of obviously. It's a beautiful piece of music. So, Jojo Rabbit next, third on our list. So we've done Parasite, 1917, and now Jojo Rabbit.
And you love this film.
Not as much as.
Oh, that's funny.
other people.
That's my recollection. So that's probably me being old and cranky.
Old and warty. I thought
But
its
I remember
reach
you
exceeded
liking
its
it a lot more
grasp.
than I did.
That's how I felt about it generally. That its reach exceeded its grasp. That it was, and maybe it's too. Is it too woke of me to be uncomfortable about funny Nazis? I'm not sure they're funny. Are they?
I think if you haven't lived in a world with LOLO, then I think you're going to be a lot more raw to the situation than some people. But
I mean, he's a New Zealand director.
I think you're right, and I think that was the central challenge of the film. I think that's what he was trying to achieve. Not trying to achieve. I think that's perhaps what he set out to do, which was how can I do this film in the 21st century when times are changing. I think if you're going to do this film, you are at front and center. You're bringing the challenge to the audience, which is, do you dare me to do this? And I think only he directing it, he writing it, and he playing the Hitler role. And I think if you had not had that, I think it would have been a different proposition. And I think also that also allowed the other actors to come on board and be all in. So I think that gave everyone the confidence that this is a legitimate point of view. Get on board. Now, I think this is also a good example of a score, perhaps. Look, I'm very sensitive. I don't want to suggest that the score is working separately to the film, because that's not the composer's job, and they would hate you for saying that. But I think also a score can exist outside of the film and be enjoyed separately.
Yeah. Okay, so you weren't such a big fan of the score, is what you're saying right there. I enjoyed the score. I thought it was good.
I think I enjoy the score separately, and then when I watched the film again this week,
I
enjoyed both much more.
Right.
Maybe it's just time. Maybe you're right. Maybe as an audience, you don't want to be challenged.
Well, this is an interesting thing about movies that I'm discovering more and more, which is I seem to enjoy them more the second time, which is not the plan, is it? That isn't the plan, because a lot of people think I'm insane for watching a film more than once. I mean, people out in the world of not being obsessed with movies think I only watch a film once. No. See a film once is just to for me, almost these days, it's become like prepping myself for the second time.
Totally.
Which is
absolutely.
weird.
I couldn't agree more. And I think, do you think it's why do you think that is? Do you think it's because the first time there's so much pressure on it, or you put pressure in?
I'm sort of trying to decode it rather than let it come at me, which is not a good habit to have got into. I'm trying to work it out as I go, rather than just kind of relaxing and let it do its thing. I'm sort of trying to work out, which is not great. Occasionally, and unfortunately, the older I get, the less it happens, just because you've seen more and experienced more. Occasionally, a film is so good, that doesn't happen, that I just get totally drawn into it and lose myself completely. But that is happening less and less, and I do think that's not necessarily a reflection on the quality of films. It's just the fact that I've been around longer. If you were 15 watching Jojo Rabbit, you might have a completely different response to it. But,
that's true. That's really true.
An old warty 58-year-old man, quite different.
Now, do you think that obviously 2020 was a specifically interesting year for movies because of pandemic?
I think, well, you and I are both BAFTA voters. We're lucky to be BAFTA voters, and I'm struggling, not because of the quality of the film, but I'm struggling because of my perceived lack of cinema this year. That's what I'm struggling with. There's a lot of very good stuff there, but it's not necessarily an enormous amount of really good cinema out there, because it was all pulled and pushed off into next year or this year or next year.
That was my next question, which is, do you think that? I mean, obviously, you have a little bit of insider knowledge owning.
Yes, a cinematograph.
Independent cinema. Would you say that's because everyone's holding back their jewels?
Yeah, probably. Almost certainly. I mean, there's stuff we are looking at and that we've seen, which is great, that you wouldn't have got a chance to see in any normal year because it would have been swamped by everything else.
Right, that's interesting too. That's a good point. But do you think the fact that you're not at the BAFTA screening up in London, surrounded by filmmakers, having that big experience, so you are experiencing films differently, even if you're getting to watch them at the cinema on your own or in your house.
No, well, I can't really. It doesn't really work like that. And I can't, no, I just think that we've been served a diet of a different kind of films. I mean, a lot of films that we'll get to later, stuff like Possessor and St. Maud and things like that, which have, whilst they're great movies, they've been afforded an exposure to a larger group of people than they would in a normal year.
Right.
I think that's what's happened.
Which is a good thing?
Yeah, no, of course it's a good thing.
Right.
But I'm still struggling.
Just making sure that's...
Yeah, no, it's a good thing. But I'm struggling to find cinema. Big cinema. I mean, in 1917, whether you love it or you hate it, is cinema, isn't it?
Right.
In all of its brilliantness. It's kind of, because it's big screen, scope, loud, big, and
we only really had one of those this year.
Yes, that's true.
And
Jojo, we did really well with Jojo Rabbit. We did really, really well.
Yes, I definitely think that's... I think if you're looking at something else on the list coming up, which I'm not sure if that's where you're headed right next, but
I don't know. You're allowed to say it. We don't care. No, I don't think I put Tenet in, did I? Hang on, let's have a look at the list. Did I? No, I didn't.
Oh, no, you didn't. Not your last list. Interesting.
Ooh, controversial.
Interesting. What was the...
rationale?
Yeah.
I don't remember. So the music from Jojo Rabbit there, I think it, I think that represents the film quite well, because it kind of does jolly bits and it does sad bits, and it's.
I do too. I think it's absolutely. I mean, it's full of heart.
Yes.
The whole score is full of heart, and I think the other thing, and I think I'm remembering this from something that he said that Michael Giacchino said in an interview at some point. He didn't want the score to be funny, and I think that it has replaced all the kind of obvious sort of funny bits with heart and emotion, which it just comes through, and then it also ends with that sort of brass band.
It
sound
does,
at the
yes.
end, which
but I think
his
in any given year, I always end up buying his scores because they're just wonderful, and I have to say it's only in the last 3 or 4 years I've kind of been aware. I think it was the first Planet of the Apes film that sort of, or Star Trek, would be Star Trek, I suppose.
No, smashing. I'm going to say the Star Trek. I mean, obviously he was a long-time collaborator with J.J. Abrams.
Right, Super 8 he did, didn't he, I believe, and one or two others.
And Jurassic World, Ratatouille, going back as far. Yeah. But yeah, Star Trek, I think if you listen to that score, I can't remember which film it was. I think it was the first one, where he has that sequence where
in Star Trek.
Yeah, who flies it?
Captain Kirk.
So
Sulu.
Kirk's dad.
Oh, Kirk's dad.
Kirk's dad is trying to save everybody, and his wife's is in the escape pod, and she's having the baby, and that's going to be Kirk in the alternate JJ universe of Star Trek.
Yes.
And meanwhile, he's coming to terms with the fact he's about his imminent demise, and it's just a heartbreaking piece of music. Stunning.
Yeah, I thought, and actually, because you're slightly on a hiding to nothing with Star Trek, aren't you? Because you've got that, not only have you got the original Alexander Courage music to live up to, you've also got the, what's
Jerry Goldsmith.
Jerry Goldsmith score to live up to. So that was actually, it could have been a poison chalice. But I love his scores for the Planet of the Apes films. I think they're just wonderful. And of course, he broke everyone's heart. His music was just as a massive part of that opening 15 minutes of Up as the story itself, because it's just it's I'm welling up just thinking about it.
Oh, it's true. It's true though. I think actually, I want to say that I think Taika Waititi called him out of the blue and said to him, hey, remember, I don't think they knew each other before this. They hadn't worked together before, and I think he just called him out of the blue and said, hey, that thing you did for Up, can you do that for this film?
Right. Yeah.
And if you think about a sort of fairy tale about a boy thinking about his imaginary friend,
yes,
it's definitely in that same zone.
There are similarities. But I think it has a slightly harder edge to it, doesn't it? And it ends with, of course, David Bowie in German, which we've seen in films quite a lot these days. But so Jojo Rabbit. Now the next one. This is a film you like more than I did, Greyhound. But I do love that music. I think that music's amazing. Blake
Talking
Neely.
about tension.
Yeah.
I mean, this is a film actually talking about 2020. I think it's a masterclass in tension, and I think.
So we should say this is less well known than Jojo 1917 and Parasite. This is a film. Tom Hanks is it's set in World War II, and Tom Hanks is is he a captain or a commander of a vessel that's chaperoning the merchant navy across the Atlantic during the Second World War.
And they're about to pass the one piece of sea that is unprotected by air cover.
Yes.
And so they're on their own. For I think it's 36 hours,
something
38
like
hours.
That. Yeah.
So, and then this is where the wolf pack hunts.
Yes, the U-boats.
The Nazi submarines. And it's
wait a minute, that's like 3 World War IIs already. That tells you
we're
British. That's the British element working here. But I mean, it's still it's still a thing that cinema goes back to all the time, isn't it?
I got to say, I think, especially being English, and especially kind of knowing that how much we love a war film in England, it does seem strange how many World War II movies still get made. Now, not to say that it wasn't quite an important event in world history, but and deserves our thinking about and remembering, so we don't repeat those mistakes. But I think it is surprising, that happens. That said, this is a film I think specifically was perfect for 2020 on account of this is, I think, the first film that was going to have a big Sony release, and then suddenly Sony bought it. And,
yes, one of the early casualties. Sorry, one of the early moves to streaming, wasn't it?
Sorry, my mistake. Sony didn't buy it. Apple bought it.
Apple did, yeah.
And put it as a streamer.
But actually, talking about the British, but this is actually an American film about an American ship, isn't it?
That's true.
Which
yes.
As a Brit, sometimes you get a bit, okay, so they won the war then, did they? And the Brits are sort of reduced to these sort of, they're down at, I say, you fellows, are you all right over there? On the intercom, aren't they?
That's really funny. That's like you don't even see them in the film, do you?
No, you don't. You just hear them on the other end of the line saying, well done, Tom Hale, bit of driving a boat there, well done.
It's the equivalent of Tom and Jerry's mum.
Yeah.
Or the lady.
But I suppose for me, it was just that it was so all CGI, I think. I mean, not that, come on. I can't expect them to do this.
Totally. I couldn't, yeah. And I know that they shot a lot on a real boat, and they shot actual water plates, and they shot actual stuff, and they do all that good stuff you're meant to do, but I think ultimately it did like a little CG, but that's why I think it was okay that it was a streamer.
Okay.
Because you're getting all the things you want. You're getting Tom Hanks, you're getting massive tension, beautifully shot, beautifully covered, beautifully acted.
Yeah, and I think...
great. Simple story, super well told.
Yeah, I suppose, again, this is the Oldham wartiness coming in here, is the fact that, if you want a film about the Atlantic, war in the Atlantic, it's The Cruel Sea for me, which is a different kind of film, of course.
There are two types of people on this earth.
It's the war, the whole bloody war. I mean, that was incredible film. Anyway, so Blake Neely, I don't really know much about him at all. He seems to have written a lot of telly.
I knew him from actually. You can tell us all the stuff that he's done, but
he's a sprightly 51.
Oh,
yeah, there you go. So let's have a look. Oh, lots of stuff, lots of additional music.
Well, that's a big tradition, isn't it?
Yes, the sort of way in, isn't it? Big, long list of stuff, actually. Okay, but one of the things about this is rather like you mentioned about the score for 1917 is this is a ratcheting up all the time. It ratchets up. This sort of constant. So this is Blake Neely's it's called From Beneath. So now we're going to move on to Christopher Willis's score for The True History of David Copperfield, which I mean, the reason I put this on my list was because it, again, perfectly encapsulates the film. And
I was going to ask you, because this is one of the films I had to watch this week, because I hadn't seen it.
Good. That's really interesting. How did you find it?
I enjoyed it. I did enjoy it. I actually enjoyed it more than the Death of Stalin.
Right.
I thought that had a... I thought it was... I mean, it was still terrific. It's well made, and it's Armando Iannucci, which I think... Yeah, come on.
Yeah.
You can enjoy his films. But I thought this was weirdly, slightly less mannered than Death of Stalin.
But I think I just love its kind of breathlessness. That's what I love about it. It's like this gallop through the story, because again, worldwide, we all, people love Dickens. But I think particularly in British culture, we are rather kind of hammered over the head with it slightly. And especially on Sunday night telly, when you're growing up, there's another Dickens. I mean, not so much now, but certainly through the 70s and 80s, there was a lot of Dickens on the television. And there is a tradition in British cinema, particularly, of adapting Dickens, not always with the greatest success. Obviously, David Lean did it brilliantly. And then, obviously, it was Oliver, which is not, it must count. Of course, it's a Dickens adaptation. But it's kind of like an amalgam of those two things. Although it's not a musical, it has a very musical quality to it, in that it moves along at this pace and it has a rhythm. And you're just not, I almost felt like the film was leaving me behind. It was racing along so quickly.
That's a really good point. I felt actually the same, but I was happy to be along for the ride.
Yeah, no, and also it had that. It sort of harks back also to that again old British film quality of every face being recognisable. Mm-hmm. Again, growing up in Britain, you always kind of know. Oh look, there's Richard Wattis, there's Sam Kidd, there's all these there are all those. In fact, for most people, to be honest, they weren't even names, were they? They were just faces that you kept seeing in the same films all the time. And again, this film kind of, because he packed it with loads and loads of Brits, but from all kinds of backgrounds. It was just an absolute joy to watch, and I thought, I loved every minute of it. And
I think the score did a terrific job of doing that thing, especially in a period piece, where you're having to world build too. You're having to create this background, this world, so that all these people can exist together. And it's tricky in a comedy. I think in Death of Stalin, I think that's what I didn't respond to. It felt like it was sort of we're putting on a play. And this felt like I was entering a movie that was it existed in its own terms. It wasn't a kind of a pastiche, and it wasn't a satire. It felt like it was living in its own world.
So the next one on our list, Theodore Shapiro's score for Bombshell, which I think we both picked, actually.
Yeah, terrific, and I think is a good representation on this list of a smorgasbord.
A smorgasbord?
A smorgasbord.
It's easy for you to say, but I bet you can't spell it. Yeah. No, don't. No. It's fine. You don't have to. Yeah.
It's spelled... Is it?
Yeah.
American sirens in the background, sorry.
That's all right. That's good. Gives it a bit of colour, bit of flavour. This is music by who did I say it was mine? Theodore Shapiro. Don't really know much about. Oh, he's been around for a while.
He has.
I mean, I'm learning all the time, and these shows, when I've done shows before, I learn all the time about. That's what I say. I'm not an expert. I'm kind of learning as I go. But he seems to have been around for quite some time. I had him listed as he wrote the music for State and Maine back in 2000. And actually, you picked a slightly different track than I did. But
which one did you pick?
I picked the I can't remember what it's called, but it's the one with all the Oh Superman type voices in it.
It sounds a bit like, who doesn't love a film score that sounds a bit like the Frog Chorus?
Yeah, Oh Superman. What was her name? Oh, it was a hit, wasn't it? Oh Superman, ha 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 ha. You don't remember, do you?
I do not remember, and if I did, I wouldn't know.
Oh, she was married to Lou Reed. Oh my goodness, I can't think of her name. Oh, this is terrible. People are shouting now at the podcast. And they're probably shouting at it anyway, like, how do I turn this thing off? Will it ever end?
I'm trapped under this fallen bookcase.
Yeah. Okay, so Theodore Shapiro's music for Bombshell, and then moving swiftly on, because people must be getting slightly tired of us by now, Harry Gregson Williams' score for Moulin. Now, I'm conflicted about this, because I said there was one I hadn't seen. I haven't seen Moulin, to be honest.
Interesting.
Well, because, I obviously have a slight beef with Disney. Disney Telly, I call it, not Disney Plus, because obviously that would have helped us enormously in August to stay afloat a bit better. Had they, I didn't have so much of a problem. I would obviously prefer them not to have gone straight to Disney Plus, but okay, you've gone to Disney Plus. I respect that decision, but at least give us the chance to show it as well. That's what really got to me, and they did the same. We could have saved Christmas with Soul, but they did the same again. So I haven't watched Soul yet, which is a ridiculous holdout. It's just it's an absurd holdout, really.
Look, I think everyone gets get a free pass because 2020. Yeah. I think also that thing is going to shake out in 21. Of course, it seems that Netflix is maintaining its day and date releasing strategy.
Yeah, and I think actually, oddly, the lockdown that we're experiencing now, which is as tough as the first one, actually may help us, oddly, because people really are going to be fed up with being indoors. They are going to be really fed up with it. And I think cinema will bounce back very strongly for that very reason. Because,
I agree.
All right, so Netflix go, oh, look at me and all my films. And Disney go, oh, look at me and all my films. And HBO go, look at me and all my... And there's an endless list of apps that you're supposed to have. And actually, I just want to get out of the house, have a burger and watch a film. I don't need to sit up my sofa. I don't know if you seen that. There's a Simpsons where Homer He hasn't moved in so long. There's a groove in the sofa.
I do remember.
And that's what my sofa's like. It's like, oh my God, you know.
No, I think you're totally right, and I think the shared experience of watching a movie is never going to be something that's. You and I have had this conversation many times over the years about what's coming and how it's going to change and all these things, and I think for sure that it has changed forever.
Yes.
But what it's going to become has not yet defined itself.
No, it hasn't, and it will change. And you know, the window has been, to use a phrase of, you know, not buzzword, but anyway, to use an internal industry phrase, the window has been broken, and it will never go back to that 6-month thing again. Which is fine by me. I don't mind as long as I get a good few weeks out of it. I don't care. And I think ultimately the big films will stay in the cinema like they did before. But you know,
and also, I think I don't know. I'm not saying this in such a sweeping statement, but it does feel like your cinema specifically caters to people who are a little bit streamer ignorant or streamer agnostic or streamer
incompetent. I think probably be.
Maybe we cut this bit, but
no. I mean, they're lovely. But yeah, I mean, we're not the world demographic by a million miles. But I do think even globally, Disney could have helped a bit with Mulan. They really could, and they could have helped with Soul.
There are. I mean, I've heard this from a few people on this side of the pond.
Yes,
who would say there is a kind of there is a kind of a loyal group of cinema viewers who will go and watch a cinema movie in a cinema for $25, what it is, and then will go home and buy it that same week if they can.
Absolutely, no, there will. There is, and
enjoy it again and watch it.
Yeah, and also, and this is always one of the most unpopular things I ever say at any meeting ever.
Among the many,
I forgot my trousers. No, it's that actually statistics show that the people who pirate movies the most are the ones that go to the cinema the most. Now, all right, I'm not advocating piracy in any way, but I'm just saying that people who love movies go to the movies. And, you know, that's kind of top and bottom of it. I mean, I could be just fooling myself. I don't know, because, you know, I'll be selling the big issue outside Waitrose by next Christmas if they don't.
No, but I think you're totally right. And I think what's great about the streamers for movie makers and movies is they're going to make a lot of them. They're going to be making films that aren't necessarily $200 million each because they still want to make cheaper films. And that's, I think, the kind of the more indie filmmaker is going to get a bit more of a look in. So we're going to see some interesting films. And if you think the makeup of those streamers is to super serve every single demographic in the world, you're looking at super serving some pretty small niches.
Yeah.
And that's only good if there's money for them, for those films.
It's true. It's just that it felt like we were a real friend in need at the time. So, Mulan I didn't see. However, I have listened to the score and I think it's wonderful. If the film is as good as the score... And, you know, I think Harry Gregson Williams, who wrote the music, Mulan, I'm really rubbish at explaining things to people because there may be people listening that don't know about stuff. But Mulan is the sort of live action remake of the cartoon set in China I'm not sure exactly what time it would be. It'd be ancient China. Let's say ancient China.
This sounds completely waterproof.
Yeah, well, I don't know the exact time it's set. It's
olden.
It's a
olden
big.
times.
It's a very well-known story in China, isn't it? It's not a. It's a.
Yes, it is.
It is.
And I'm actually curious. I'm back to kind of. I'd be curious to see the translation. I'm curious to see what version it is that we've taken to the West.
Right. Well,
American
obviously,
Mulan story.
it probably didn't have funny voiced dragons in it, like the original Disney animated cartoon feature, which was very popular actually. And the music in that, I mean, the songs I thought were great, but clearly culturally it was a million miles from its source. But then that's a Disney thing. I mean, if you start leveling accusations to Disney, well, I'm sorry, the Jungle Book's nothing like Rudyard Kipling, or Snow White's nothing like the original, Grimm's fairy tales or whatever. You're on a hiding to nothing, aren't you? You really are.
Yes.
But Yeah, so I haven't used. I assume you've seen the film. I haven't.
I have, and I really enjoyed it.
Oh, you
I
did?
Thought
Okay.
Yeah, I did. As a story, I mean, look, it is what it is. And by the way, I never saw the original animated version.
Well, we did.
Which is interesting.
But Ellie is one of Ellie's favourite films. My daughter Ellie's favourite film. So she was like, 7 or 8 or 9, and it's like kids do. Watched it over and over and over and over again. So, no, she loved it. But I believe it didn't go down especially well in China, did it?
Look, I think there's so many minds kind of anything about to your point about cultural appropriation and misunderstanding stories on different through different lenses. I think this is. What are you going to do?
I know.
You're totally stuck.
You're on a hiding to nothing, I think is the best phrase you can come up with.
I mean, I'm currently working on a show that has some Cleopatra in it. And we've had that conversation that we were having the casting conversation about Cleopatra and how to cast what ethnicity is she, where's she from, how much Macedonia, how much Egypt. And then right as we're having that conversation, Patty Jenkins and
they're having that conversation right now, aren't they? Yeah.
Straight into that freight train, and it's like you got to see this stuff coming. You got to be thinking about it. You have now. You got to be prepared for having people not appreciate your point of view. And I think that's just where we are. And I think it's smart and legitimate.
Yeah, I don't think Elizabeth Taylor would fly now, would she? Really?
I don't think so.
I love Cleopatra. I love that film. I'm one of the 10 people on the planet Earth that can happily watch Cleopatra from beginning to end. But Harry Gregson Williams, who is just one of the best out there, I think, for my money. Okay, so we'll leave it there for the time being. That's part one of our trudge through some of the film music from 2020. This is, I must hasten to add, by no means a definitive list. I was surprised when I started working my list out just how much good stuff there was. Anyway, please do tune in for the next episode, which will be out in a few days' time. Could be a week. Difficult to say. Because let's face it, time has ceased to have any meaning, hasn't it? But I'll see you next time, and thanks for listening.
Something special, really different. Tastes great. Frankie's spicy pork and beef sausage in a sesame seed roll. Topped with mustard, tomato, or fruity sauce. Frankie's, the super hot dog. On sale at the kiosk now. Frankie's, from Lion.